Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we're going to be learning about DevTools. We're going to be talking about how they make us more productive and if we do it right, not less productive. And to teach us about that is going to be Elvis. Elvis, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm so excited to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, I actually woke up in the middle of the night because I was excited for this. I literally woke up at like 2:30 and I was excited, and then it finally wore off around like 5, and then I went back to sleep.
I get it, man. I do the same thing when I've got a big a thing I'm excited for. I'll wake up and I'm like, no, this is when you need to sleep. You want to be well rested for this.
Yeah, I take some notes, and that helps me go back to sleep. So
nice. That's great. So I mean, we're talking today about a lot of things that are really near and dear to my heart. But before we talk about those, I want to talk about you. For folks who are unfamiliar with you and your work, can you give us a bit of a background on who you are, what you're into?
Yeah, so I'm Elvis. I work traditionally as a developer experience engineer, developer advocate. And then I guess when I was in college, I spent all my summers working as a software engineer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I care a lot about developer experience, which can mean different things to different people. But the space, at least with regards to like company and product, I really like working in DevTools, especially tools that are PLG. Yeah, definitely PLG motions are the most fun.
Yeah,
developer advocate. Yeah,
for sure. So let's talk a little bit about like dev tooling here, because when you say so PLG is product led growth for people who don't know that, and if I understand that correctly, the idea behind PLG is that you're not like a company that's driven by sales. You're a company that's driven by like organic product adoption because the product is so good that people want to use it. Is that sort of a good encapsulation?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the ideal motion is like you can go to like a VP and be like, there are already 70 people using our product within the company. If you sign like a deal, you unlock like team stuff and enterprise things that help them collaborate, and then ideally you have like some symbiotic value add.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen a lot of products like this. I think, the way that most of us use something like Figma, the way that most of us used Slack or Discord, is that the team was already on it, and then the company was like, if we formalize this, we get extra benefits. And so then you get the company Figma account or the company Slack or whatever.
Yeah, and ideally a volume discount too, if you have enough seats and things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're working in DevTools, and when we say DevTools, it's not anything a developer would use, but more specifically tools that developers use to do their jobs.
Yeah, so like software development lifecycle. Yeah.
And so this could be anything from my code editor to something like GitHub, where I manage my code and workflow. Maybe something like my terminal, something like, what any other categories here that I'm missing?
Yeah, like I think a lot about like infra tools, tools to help you test. I think even tools to kind of like interface with people that aren't developers, like Linear, I think would count as a developer tool because the ergonomics there are just so nice. They're kind of like meeting developers where they are, which is why it's like super popular. And like every startup has a website that looks like their website. But,
every site looks like the Linear site so much that I got asked to build a demo once for a company, and they were like, build us like a SaaS app demo. And so I didn't like look at the Linear code, but I built a copy of the Linear homepage, and I just made the headline, "This site totally doesn't look like Linear." Okay.
Yeah. There's actually there's a website that just tracks like homepages that look like Linear, and there's like 100 pages on there, and they're like all companies, a lot of them are funded. So
that's really funny. Yeah. Okay, so then the other big question that I have is that as somebody who loves dev tooling, I just love tools in general, right? Like I love to play with new things and learn new stuff. But the sort of downside to tooling is that there's so much of it, and there are so many things that I could be trying, and maybe if I switched to Vim, I would be more productive or faster. Maybe if I switch to, I don't know, VS Code with Copilot or to Cursor or to what, maybe I'd be faster. Maybe if I adopted this other tool into my workflow, I'd be more productive. And then there's this sort of like vicious cycle of I'm never actually working because I'm always optimizing my dev tooling environment.
Yeah.
So how do you manage this? Like how often do you find yourself adopting new tools?
Yeah, actually, I definitely try tools. I think for me, what I do, I try to time box it,
Oh,
and
nice.
usually I'm not trying a tool that isn't directly related to my, like if I'm trying a tool that my teammate's not going to use with me, then I try to only test those things over a weekend, like not during the work hours.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of like my way of like isolating them into like a certain period of time, which is pretty helpful because I can also batch try tools, right? So it's like I might find 4 or 5 tools during the week, and it's like instead of me like going down some like rabbit hole or getting like nerd sniped, it's like if I can put those on like a Saturday, like that helps as well.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
That's probably a more productive way than I do it, which is I refuse to try anything new until people have been talking about it for so long that I know it's not going to go away.
Yeah, that is gonna stick. Yeah. Yeah, especially with startups because like they can change their pricing model and now it's like no longer accessible to you and things like that. So.
Well, and sometimes it's just like, we love a new tool as a community, but then they don't stick. And so I spend a lot of time onboarding into something new, and then I find out that nobody's still there, that the usage dropped off, and now the benefit that I thought I was going to get is gone. And so it's like the social media thing too, right? Like I don't join. I usually join the social media network to get my username.
Yeah,
but I don't like use it until I actually see people are there.
Yeah, definitely.
But so okay, let's talk a little bit about the specific tools we want to cover today. So we were going to do a bit of a showcase, some of your favorite tools. You want to give us the high level on each one?
Yeah, definitely give the high level. I'll also add that. Like I think I've started like almost 900 projects.
Oh,
and
dang.
so like yeah. So like if anyone's interested in learning about more tools, I kind of GitHub stars, they have like you can make lists. And so I tried to like categorize them. So I have like a Python list with like 100 projects and like a CLI thing. And so if people are like looking for new tools, my star page might be helpful. And then I was actually working on an app where I'm trying to like make this little dashboard where I can do like vector search on the readmes. That way I can like find the projects that I've starred by describing them, because I just don't remember the name. Like it's like they'll have some like 3-letter name. It's like I'm not going to remember this tool name, but I can describe what the tool does. And so I'm like working on an app where I can eventually like search through them super quickly and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I actually had no idea you can make lists on GitHub. So today I learned.
Yeah. But in terms of the tools I wanted to talk about, I wanted to demo Warp and Graphite, and then eventually Reflex if you have time for it. And then I'll probably have a couple of like CLI tools that I'm using that I found to be helpful in making me more productive. And then I wanted to give a shout out to Chalk.ai, because I'm really excited about the things they're working on. And that's like super relevant if anyone watching is like in data engineering or machine learning.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. All right. So let's I guess where's the right place to start? I guess the right place to start is to just open up a terminal and start rolling. So why don't we jump over into this view here? I'm going to put up this banner and I'm going to put up this banner, and I'm going to talk a little bit. I just dropped this link in the chat for anybody who, like me, was unfamiliar with lists in GitHub. We were talking to Elvis today, so I'm going to drop a link here so you can go get connected. And then these are a few of the tools that you were going to talk about. So this is Warp. This is
Warp.
Graphite. You said, let's see, here's Reflex. And then you mentioned Chalk.
Yeah.
And is it Chalk.ai?
Yeah. Okay. Can we start with Chalk? Since I won't be showing you, I'll just be talking about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it for a second.
Yeah. So I guess the headline is real-time platform for machine learning. And so I think for people that are working in ML, the quickest the quickest explanation is that it's like a feature store that's just feature packed. But I can kind of unpack these different keywords like real time, platform, and then also ML. And so I would say Chalk is a data platform that lets you deploy and build ML models and ML infra. And so like if you scroll down a little bit, like click the feature pipelines. Yeah. So the way you'd start is that you can like build, let's say like a model that has a bunch of different, like, I think of features as data points. It's like you're trying to make the decision, like a decision. Typically this looks like, let's say you have some kind of financial transaction and you're trying to determine whether it's like fraud, right? It's like you want to look at a bunch of different factors to determine whether it's fraud. And in the case of Chalk, they're trying to do this for real-time applications. And so they have a bunch of optimizations so that you can like serve responses back with super low latency. And so the three main benefits are scale. So like they're kind of like one of the biggest users of Google's Kubernetes engine. And so they scale really well and you don't have to deploy it yourself. You can deploy it in like your VPC. The second thing that's pretty cool is that I think like 25% of all transactions are like running, like in North America, are like running through Chalk, which is a crazy number. Yeah, and I think their main benefit is this developer experience, right?
Okay.
Because you can define all of your models in Python code. And the cool thing is that they all get modeled and cached, and they're like temporally consistent. So like you can have a model, tell it, give me a prediction based on data within this time window, and then it can automatically like compute that for you. And so it makes like working with models really easy. And the nice thing is that it is Python, but it's also fast. So there's a question of like, how is it fast? And I was thinking about this recently, and I realized it's fast because Python is kind of just, for them, an interface. And so if you look at this, it's all declarative. And so you're writing Python, but it eventually just gets converted into a bunch of C++ and Rust because it's declarative, kind of like SQL, right? It's like we declare what we want, and then everything gets optimized. And so I don't know, the ergonomics is super nice, and I just really love the tool. And if I got access to the tool earlier, I would have gave a demo of this. But
Sure.
Yeah. I guess we can go to Warp though.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So let's before we talk about Warp, I want to do one quick shout out here, which is that this episode, like every episode, is being live captioned. We've got Vanessa here with us. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsor, who you're going to see in just a second, Tuple. Tuple lets us share screens, collaborate. It's really, really good for remote pair programming, which we're going to show right now as I jump over into, here's Elvis's screen.
Yeah, cool.
So
can I make this bigger?
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's good, right? Let me know in the chat if you want that bigger.
Okay, cool. Let me reset this. All right, cool.
All right, now we're looking at Warp, so that's warp.dev. So if I want to get into Warp, what's the first thing that I should do? And also, the first thing I'm noticing is that this is already interesting because why are we down here?
Yeah. So so I guess Warp is a terminal. So it's like an app that you would download like any other app, and you kind of just want to use it as a drop-in replacement for like your built-in Mac terminal. But there are also other terminals like iTerm, Alacrity, Kitty, Hyper. But in terms of why the input is at the bottom, you can actually move it around. So you can move it to the top, you can move it to the bottom. I actually just prefer to have it at the bottom. That way it's not moving whenever I'm running output. That way it's like in a consistent spot. And I just get trained to like look at a spot when I'm looking for the command input. So that's why I just like having it at the bottom. But some people move it to the top. And there's actually a command palette. And so I could like do like if I type top, I can do like start input at the top and then move it to the top.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just a preference thing.
So the command palette is already interesting because as far as I know, I've never seen that in a terminal before.
Yeah. So I would say Warp is, when you're using it, it feels closer to using an IDE.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Like that's the developer experience trying to provide.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how that actually works. So typically
Totally.
when I'm using my terminal, I'm using it to, run some commands that I have memorized, like my git commands, things like that. Maybe if it's something I do a lot, I've got an alias for it, so I've set one of those up.
Yeah.
Every time I have to open my like dot Z shell RC to change things, I get nervous. I'm about to break my whole computer.
Yeah.
So, which I have done several times. Like
Yeah.
we've all seen how unpredictable my IDE is because I keep doing weird stuff to it. So as we're kind of working in this system, what are some extra things that we can do, or like what's the workflow in Warp that makes
Yeah.
you like this tool?
Dude, so many things. Like hundreds. There's like hundreds of small things, but then like 3 or 4 big things that are like game changers. And so, I guess the first thing to show is, okay, one, there's multi-line. So I guess so. This is the input editor, right? And
Okay.
the nice thing about Warp is that the input editor is actually native. So the Warp team built a native input editor, and the nice thing is that when you decouple your input from your shell, right? So I guess even a higher level is the shell and the terminal are 2 different things. But what's happened is they've been kind of like strongly, tightly coupled. And so typically with a regular terminal, you're kind of using it as like a screen that the
Right.
shell just like sends characters to, right? And so what happens is it's that you'll type into a terminal, it'll send characters over to your shell. The shell will send you info back to display those characters. It'll also like take that input, parse it, right? Give it to your OS, do some computation, and then come back and then display more characters. And so a lot of people end up, especially folks who just came out of like CS school, they don't realize that the terminal and the shell are actually moving at 2 different layers. So the terminal is technically a GUI, whereas the shell is a TUI, right? But we're not using the terminal as a GUI because we're only using it to process text and give text to your shell. And so the key thing to learn about Warp is like, oh, what if we only use the shell to run commands, and then everything else we're going to stop relying on the shell for and move it into the terminal layer, which then unlocks things like mouse interactions or having a command palette, because now you're not at a TUI, you're in the GUI level. Yeah. So it just opens a bunch of doors to like innovate and improve the developer experience. And so in the case of this text editor, right, this text editor is sitting at the terminal level. And so like, for example, so these characters have syntax highlighting, like it's the terminal doing that and not your shell, right? And the beautiful thing about this is like, so if I hover over this, right, I can see what the command is, right? And that's being provided by the terminal, not the shell, right? And so like, if I add flags, like I can press tab.
Oh my God, autocomplete for flags with context. Holy shit.
Yeah, with context. So if I press tab again, I can see my branches. And then let's see, so I can do like main or whatever. And then I can like use my mouse. So I can like delete this. I can undo, redo. I can also do like multi-cursor, right? So that's the first thing is like improving the actual text editing experience.
I'm sorry, you did that so fast. Can you show that one more? You just did multi-cursor in your terminal?
Yeah, totally. So you can just like command click in multiple places. You can. There's even a feature. There's even a feature where I can. Let's see. There's even a feature where I can like write a command and then I can send it out to all my panes. So like if you're SSHing into a bunch of machines and you want to run the same commands, you can have it broadcast those commands across different panes and things, which is pretty cool.
That's slick. That's extremely slick. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like you came out strong out of the gate here, but I feel like we're barely scratching the surface. So like what?
So I guess the next thing to show you is that you can change your prompt, right? And so like, for example, I typically use Starfish, which is like a cross shell prompt that it's written in Rust, which is really nice. And the thing I like about it is that if you're on like Linux, you can just install that same prompt and then you kind of have it on all of your machines.
Okay.
And Starship's nice because it gives you a lot of context. And So I guess the thing to show here is like, this is a prompt provided by my shell. And so again, it's like the shell is like giving me back characters, giving me back context. And so my input is going to be like attached to this prompt, right? But then Warp also has a native prompt, right? So this prompt isn't running as a shell process, but it's running as a terminal process, right? And so the cool thing about that is that the different sections of my prompt are now also clickable and interactable, right? So I can like copy my Git branch by hovering over the Git section of my prompt, right? I eventually, right, you can have literally like an app store for your prompt and have like a Spotify plugin, right? And all of these things can be like running asynchronously as their own process. And then people can make their own prompt pieces, and you can kind of like make a market where people are like sharing prompts and things like that. And so these are some of the things that you enable by like moving things out of the shell and into the GUI layer. Ooh.
That's right. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing to show is okay. So whenever I do run a command, Warp makes a block for you. So I can like click this, and then I can scroll up and down to previous blocks, right? And this is helpful because like this block is like 10,000 lines.
It's huge.
So instead of me like scrolling forever, I can actually jump to the bottom of it. And now that it's its own primitive, I can like take actions on it, right? And
well, you can. I mean, just the ability to like copy it.
Yeah,
because like I can't tell you how many times I get like a really long error stack trace, and I need to report the bug, and so I'm like copying and like scrolling up in my editor, hoping I didn't miss the previous prompt and like double copy or something like that.
Yeah.
This alone feels like it's worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
So whoa, what's happening?
So now that we have blocks, I can right click them and take actions, right? So I can copy the whole output. I can copy just the command. I can share a block and make a link to it. So I can send this to you in like Google Chrome, and you can open it and see what the output was.
Dude, will you actually, because we're on two, will you just share that with me real quick? I want to see how this works.
This is what it looks like.
That's incredible.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you think this is cool, wait, there's another thing you can share that's like much cooler that I think will. Yeah, but this is like super helpful if you're like debugging. That way you're not like taking a screenshot and like putting it in Slack, or just like copying the text and putting it in Slack. People can see this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, QA engineers rejoice indeed. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. And then so another example why blocks are nice is I can click this block and then I click a second block. Then I can like search in just these two blocks for text. Yeah. So you can select multiple blocks, search in them. I can bookmark them. That way, if I've written like a bunch of commands after, I can easily jump to a block that I've bookmarked if there's important output there. The last thing to show you for blocks is I can even filter the block. So let's say if I type like, for example, 4701, you can grep every line of the block and only show the things that match your regular expression. And the reason that this is cool goes back to the concept of like having separation between your GUI and your shell. Since we're slicing just the view of your data, two things happen. One, you can filter information as it's still outputting, right? So I can have a process that's like showing logs on a server continuously, and then I can filter them without having to quit that process and then like feed that into grep, right? And and if I like change this, right, like if I change it to 470,
and does this work? Like if I've tailed a log, can I do the filtering live?
Yeah, that's my point, right? Because you're not doing it at the shell.
Oh my god!
Yeah, because you have the data, so it's lossless, right? You don't lose any output.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm not gonna lie. I must have tried Warp when it was way too new, because I don't remember any of this. But it was years ago, right? And so now I'm feeling like I made a huge mistake in not paying attention.
Yeah, dude. I jumped out of college to join Warp because as soon as I saw this, I was like, wow, I am obsessed. It was one of those like I couldn't sleep moments where like for 2 days I like was opening a bunch of like feature requests on GitHub, and like I was like because as soon as you understand that like, oh, this is you're doing things at the GUI, you can do anything any app does.
Right.
Yeah, it's like wow, like the possibilities are endless, and like being able to work in a team where like someone's like, oh, I wish the terminal did this, and then like over a weekend they build like a prototype. Like that's just like the developer dream. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just there's a great question in the chat. Anthony, what's up, Anthony? Asks, is it possible to control permissions on the blocks you share?
Not yet. You can delete them after you've shared them if you want to like take them down. But I think eventually like that's like an enterprise play, like being able to have them restricted by like domain and things like that.
And so if it's something
that's definitely on the roadmap, yeah.
And so if it's something that's private right now, you would just copy the output and paste that in your private chat.
Yeah.
If it's something that's more public. But I did see, if you open up that share block one more time.
Yeah, totally.
There was a button down at the bottom that says redact secrets.
Yeah.
So that's pretty dope because it'll pull out things that you know, like the important private bits, which is that's a whole thing that like you just don't think about when you're copy pasting terminal output. Sometimes you remember that you've got a console log somewhere that checks whether or not the environment variable was actually showing up the way you expected, and sometimes you don't. And having this button that says like, hey, just automatically get rid of these things that shouldn't be there. That's huge.
Yeah, and you can even add your custom regular expressions in the settings page to like expand how you find your secrets and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, this is so cool. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the next thing to show you is I can in Control R usually lets you like search through your history. And so if you press Control R in Warp, you can also search through your history and also through some other features like workflows and things. And so like if I type like Git, for example, and this is fuzzy search, so I can fuzzy search. But the nice thing is that there's like a SQLite that we'll keep where we can keep extra metadata. And so, for example, with this one, I can like, we'll keep like, oh, this is the folder or path you were on when you like ran that command. This is the branch you were on. This is how long it took to finish. This is when you ran it. And eventually it's like, you can build this like hopefully analytics layer where you can like quickly filter your history and then like jump to like a previous session. So think like in the future, like there's a sev, some like staff engineer like fix the sev. It's like hopefully you can expose different ways to like save that as a session and then eventually use that to like train other people and disseminate information and then do like retros, postmortems, things like that.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Then it's another feature. So there's also another feature called workflows. And so the idea behind workflows is like there are commands that you might run often that you want to save, or also commands that you run infrequently, but they're important. And the idea is like, you don't want to get stuck trying to remember what combination of tools were in that command. It's just much better to be able to give that command a description based on what it does, right? And then you can save them in your terminal and then quickly find them, right? And the cool thing is that when you do save them, you can add descriptions to each parameter that you're supposed to change. And then I can essentially so like I give you, it's like, so you end up opening up this palette and then you have a bunch of different workflows for different tools, right? And so like I usually use grep as an example. And so like when I click this, I can like shift tab to switch between parameters. Right? So I can type go to file path, press tab again, pick a file, shift tab again. And then like if I look at the diff, right, I just ran this command, replaced with new text. And the cool thing is that you can save these commands personally, but also at the team level.
Right.
Warp has a team concept where there are things you can share with just your team or things that you can save for yourself.
Got it. And that's, I mean, that's really interesting too, because like I can see, I know when I was at Netlify, for example, we had a lot of things that we would do where people needed to query our big customer data set to understand what had happened with like XYZ log,
Yeah.
or we needed to dig through like customer activity to figure out if anybody was using, some feature. And so they had this big shared document with a lot of copy pastable commands.
Yeah, snippets. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so, but those snippets a lot of times were just somebody did a thing and then they just copy pasted it in, and maybe they added a title that explained what it was.
Yeah. Or what to change? Like, which ones am I supposed to change? Which ones am I
Well,
supposed
and
to
a lot of times they didn't include that because like they were like, well, this is how you get X thing. And then if you wanted to make a new query that did something slightly different, you had to find the person who wrote that query and then ask them kind of how it worked. And so this is an immediate power up I can see for teams that are doing a lot of command line complex querying.
SREs, SREs, DevOps people.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's huge. That's a really, really nice feature.
I would also add that another nice thing about it being in the terminal is that you reduce drift, right? Because I might copy this command from like our shared Google Doc, and then I'll make changes. But when I make changes and I use it, I'm not gonna go back to that Google Doc. Like that tab is, I close that tab. The tab is gone. Like I'm not. Yeah, that's too much work. Yeah.
True. But so how does it work if I do want to update it? Like, if I've got a grep command that I've put into the library and I make a change.
Yeah. So let's say I'll just copy and paste this, right? So this is how you save it, right? So I can save as workflow. And then I can actually do autofill. And then autofill is like, I can give this to AI and have AI try to determine what things are worth changing.
Oh.
And then it will kind of like make my parameters for me. And then I can like, let's say I create this, right? Yeah, so typically, let's see, discard changes. Yeah, so if I click view, so if I go to my little warp drive thing, right? Where did I save it at?
I think it might not have finished saving.
Oh, really? Yeah, so if I open it back up, typically, I guess I can just paste this again and do the save as workflow. Yeah, so typically the screen will look like this again. And then I can just click, instead of this being created, it'll be update. And then if it's a team one, it'll get synced across your team. And if it's personal, it just gets saved to your personal.
Got it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are workflows. And then the next thing to show you is notebooks. So notebooks, they're similar to Jupyter notebooks.
Okay.
But the idea though is that instead of these being like Python code blocks, these are shell code blocks, and they can actually be a bunch of things, right? There's support for like Java, JSON, Go, YAML, SQL. And the nice thing about this being within the terminal is that these are runnable. So I can just like click through and run these commands, right? And so now you can make a bunch of notebooks for different kinds of tasks. So think like you clone a new project internally, and then you have a notebook for, this is how we deploy our database. So I can add regular markdown, right? So I can give descriptions to every one of these blocks to be like, oh, now in this step, do this, do that, do this.
Okay.
And you can kind of like move away from having just like static GitHub READMEs, or also like Confluence docs into like moving them to the terminal. That way I can interact with them like this. Yeah.
Does this have like a sort of like a reverse or a graceful degradation, I should say? Like, so if I make a notebook in my project on how to deploy it, does it like gracefully degrade into a README that somebody can find on GitHub, or is it sort of like only Warp users can see the notebook?
Only Warp users can see this, but you can export them to Markdown.
Okay.
And
it just turns into like a fence code block.
Yeah.
Got it.
And another thing is like, for example, with the workflows you can define them as YAML, and then you can have them set up so that Warp automatically pulls up any workflows that are embedded in your repository, right? So you can have you can have a repo and then have like a .warp folder, and then you can have workflows there. That way, when you switch to that directory, a bunch of workflows are now available because they're mapped to that particular project. Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That seems cool.
Yeah, notebooks are tight. Uh, Notebooks are tight. And then, yeah, let's see. So another thing to share is that Warp has a lot of window management, right? So I can like make multiple panes. I can drag panes around, rearrange them. I can also like maximize the pane, minimize it. Uh,
As a developer, I do seek to maximize pain often.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There definitely was a lot of memes internally about when we were doing pain management, the pain management project. But, yeah, and then a couple other features. I guess the next one that I like. Let me actually see if I have see if I have this repo. I don't have this repo. But there's also there's a lot of AI features built in, and so I can. It's a good project. Let's go here. So I can use AI to be like, write me a command that counts.
So wait, so something just happened where you moved into this mode. What did you do to make that happen?
Yeah, so I pressed the keyboard shortcut. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you press Command I, it switches to this mode called agent mode.
Got it.
You essentially can start talking to, like, I guess this is talking to Claude. So you can switch to AI and you can essentially go back and forth. And the cool thing is now I can like actually run this command. And then the idea is that the output of like me using these AI commands is a block in and of itself. And so I can kind of like have this be not only command history, but also chat history. And then I can switch back and forth. That way I can stay in the flow when I'm working with AI versus like switching to like a different window.
And that is really interesting because I do find that something that keeps me from using the chat, like the AI chat agents, is that I feel like I'm jumping out of my workflow to like open the chat window or something.
Yeah, totally.
And then I forget that it's there, and I don't remember what, which monitor it was on. And so being able to keep it sort of in the context of what I'm doing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and you can always open a split pane and then just have chat in this left pane, and then your commands in this pane, right? So like ls, and then chatting with AI, right? And then you can use keyboard shortcuts to switch between panes and maximize them. That way you like hide it and things.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you can have a pane that is minimized,
but it's hidden. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, because I do that all the time.
Yeah,
where I've got like a second terminal that's running some background process, and I wish I could just make it disappear, but I end up having like a second terminal that's sort of tucked off somewhere, or I'm opening like layered terminals, and I always don't like that because I can't figure out what's going on. So yeah, that's that is also a nice feature to have.
Yeah, and Warp also supports like backgrounding a process. It's not something I do much. Or
Wait, is that where you? I've done the backgrounding and foregrounding before, and I always forget how it works. I know that you type like FG to bring it back.
Yeah,
oh, man, but I always forget that it's there to bring it back and shut it down.
yeah. So just like running the yeah. So I just do things with panes typically. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, there's a couple more things. Oh, another cool thing is like if I am using the AI mode, I can click a block and add a block as context. So I can like click this, and then this automatically gets added as context. And so if this, for example, errored, I can just be like, help me debug this. And it knows what this is because I've attached that as context.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's like really ergonomic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
I
think this is one of those things where like, I think this is why people get excited about like the IDE editors and stuff, where you can like click on a line of code or highlight a block of code and say like, explain this to me. That feels so much nicer than like copy pasting something out into a chat box and waiting for the bot and then kind of copying the thing back out. And so when you say like, help me debug this, like maybe we try this on one of the errors that you got earlier and see because my assumption is that what'll end up happening is it's going to say, I think this is what's wrong. Do you want me to run this command to fix it?
Yeah. So yeah, let me see if I can just
Like maybe we just misspell a git, like a
do I
git
have
command
cargo?
or something.
I have cargo. Actually, yeah. Okay. So if I misspell it, so let's say do like that. So one we'll try to like fix it for you. GT is Graphite. That's why it's
Okay.
I use Graphite more than I use Git actually, and so that's why it's giving me back Graphite. But if I did like yeah, so it'll automatically try to like suggest you a fix. And then if I command I can click this and be like, help me debug. I usually on my old laptop I had a better example, but I got this laptop over like a Cyber Monday. So
but see, it got here. Like looks like you ran to. Probably meant to type git status, so it did pick that up, version control. It actually explains it, and then it gives you the block that you can click to run the command.
Yeah, and you can also just click here and have it run. Yeah, or just copy it however you want.
That's, and I think this is what I want AI to do. You know, I don't necessarily want to have like a second window or something that's sort of like always watching or listening or whatever. I want to like, if I hit something and I'm like, wait, I thought that was right, you know, and people see me do this on the show all the time where I'm like, what am I missing? Like, what's the thing that I'm missing? If I could just quickly like right click it and say, what's wrong? And the thing's like, it looks like you did this. Do you want to fix it?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that I really wanted to do is be like an unblocker.
Yeah, you can also rename tabs. So I can call this Exa. So it's back there. Oh, there's also a notifications feature. So like, if you have a command running, right? So let's say I like do a sleep, probably 2, then I hide warp. I don't know if my permissions are set up for this, but usually at the sleep 2, I'll get like a notification up here, and it'll be like, oh, this command finished running or whatever.
That's dope.
Yeah, so that's pretty helpful. I think I'm on Do Not Disturb because of the stream.
Yeah, that would track.
Yeah,
I'm also on it.
Yeah. So those are some of the main features. I think the last one I wanted to show you is so I think one of the benefits of Warp is that it's written in Rust, and the team cares a lot about performance. Did I hit a limit? Oh no, I hit a limit. You can actually share your Warp session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so you can essentially run a headless version of Warp in your browser through WebAssembly, and then I typically will like have Warp be half screen here, and then I'll literally be like looking at my same Warp session on this right side, and then I can like suggest commands to run in this one, or like I can scroll through the output, and then that's really nice for pair programming. Instead of like just having to zoom where I can only see what the person is showing me, having the browser version of Warp, I can like scroll through the output and then eventually be like, okay, try running this, and then send over a little like push, and then they can be like, all right, accept or whatever. I'm gonna run that command, which is really good for pairing.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I hit the limit because I'm not on a Warp email.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the main things I wanted to show you.
That's great. I mean, I think there are a few things that just like make this feel like I gotta get it. I think a lot of the shared features, the collaborative features, you know, given that I don't do a ton of code collaboration anymore, I can see how I would have used them in previous jobs. But honestly, like even without those, the blocks, being able to like copy output with a button as opposed to having to scroll through my giant block of whatever, being able to skip back and forth by blocks to figure out where the output was, as opposed to, you know, having to scroll and look for the command line prompt. Like those are the kinds of things that you don't realize how much time that eats until you're not doing it. And watching how quickly you were toggling between blocks, I was thinking to myself, I just kind of had that sinking feeling of like, God, I've spent a lot of time dealing with just navigating the terminal output.
Yeah, literally just that. It's also like, for me, once you get used to it, like going back to a regular terminal is so hard, and I've literally like almost smashed the keyboard because I'm like pressing tab and then like I'm not getting like my suggestions, and I've like literally almost like smashed the keyboard, and people like, what, like, this guy's tweaking, and I'm like, no, it's just like, especially because like you build your muscle memory, right? Like same thing with like using like NeoVim or Vim. It's like you have this muscle memory, and so now it's like automatic. Like
Right.
your brain is just like reacting to what you want to do. Yeah, and then it's not working, and then you're like just frustrated.
Well, and I think the thing that's interesting about that too is you know, I think the important thing for a lot of DevTools is that what it's doing is it's giving us the ability to sort of offload the unimportant parts. Like memorizing a Git command is not necessarily an important part of the job. It's just a thing we kind of have to do in order to get our work done.
Yeah.
So the real like benefit isn't that I remember what the specific syntax is for a rebase. It's that I know I need to rebase.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the terminal can sort of take remember the specific flag, remember what order everything goes in, you know, all that kind of stuff, and if it can remove that Google search or free up that space in my brain where I have to go, okay, so it's like Git rebase, something's interactive, something's, you know what I mean, like that whole thing, then I can just continue working instead of pausing to think about how the tool works. And that's where I think dev tooling really gets, you know, that's why we love TypeScript, is that even for all the pain that TypeScript causes, knowing that you immediately get an underline if you try to use something that doesn't exist, getting a helpful suggestion or autocomplete when you're trying to use a well-typed object, those benefits are so valuable that it's worth the switching cost. And I think that's what I'm seeing in Warp is a similar kind of like,
proposition. Yeah.
It's worth the switching cost because you're going to save so much time by not having to think about that stuff that's not really core to what you do every day.
Like your goal is to like free up cognitive memory so that you can stay in flow state, right? And then and with the TypeScript and like typed languages, right? I think if you're early engineer, it's very tempting to be like, oh, writing types reduces my velocity. And it's like that may be true for the first like 1,000 lines of code, but like in the long run, like having guarantees around what things are front loads so much headache because you can like find things way earlier. Like I want to find things before my app is sent to GitHub and builds, not like when a user gets like some seg fault, right? And then it's like now I'm like going through a stack trace trying to figure out like, why did this break, you know? Yeah, so definitely huge fan of typed languages and kind of the guarantees they give us.
Well, so we talked about Warp. Warp is dope. We are about halfway through the show. Let's look at, you mentioned Graphite. Let's look at
Graphite. Yes. So
Graphite is a lot of things. I've never heard of Graphite before, so you're gonna have to start from like absolute zero here.
Yeah, so I think the initial problem that Graphite was solving is being able to manage stacked diffs reasonably, right? And so like, for example, I entered at Facebook and fell in love with stacked diffs. Yeah.
Okay, so I do remember Graphite, but I've never used it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I can definitely show you how it works, right?
Yeah.
The goal of a stacked diff is essentially like I have main here. This is my main branch. And then it's like if I'm working on a feature or a new function, I want to be able to like split up my work into like essentially kind of like blocks, but I want to split them up into like unified logic. So it's like I'm making changes to
change per branch.
Yeah, change per branch essentially. Yeah. So that's how I like it. Some people have multiple changes per branch, but it's like if we can make it easier to have just one change per branch, one, the code is a lot easier to review when I send it out. And then two, Graphite enables you to like automatically, for example, rebase everything that comes after that branch if I make changes, right? And so I'll give an example what that looks like.
So this is actually you're addressing like a core pain point that I think prevents people from doing one change per branch.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I think we like the idea of one change per branch, but when we have 50 branches open and it takes more than a day or so for people to review because we're all busy and everybody's got a bunch of PRs, then the pain of trying to bring changes that merged between yesterday and today is so high that we don't do it. So instead we end up with these kind of big super branches.
Yeah.
And then it's harder to review, it's harder to merge. We don't really remember what was in the whole thing, and we kind of cut some corners on QA, all that kind of stuff, because it's just too, you can't review 5,000 lines of code well if your job is to like write code, right?
You can't give good feedback if it's that big of a change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if we take the pain away of having lots of branches and being able to merge in the upstream changes, that suddenly removes the blocker from me doing smaller PRs, because all the other benefits are there, like being able to get quality feedback. Somebody can quickly understand what I'm doing and give me like a reasonable, yes, this is good, go ahead. Now I'm like significantly less blocked. I'm much more willing to do that work.
Yeah, and a couple of things there is like, and it's like if you can make managing the rebases for this easy and managing like your branches easier, developers don't get frozen in time waiting on review because they're scared that they'll get feedback and then have to fight Git like for like hours trying to get it back into a state where they can add more features. And so Graphite solves a bunch of this.
I just had a flashback to when I was working at IBM, where we would have a big change that needed to go in and we were waiting for the next release. And we would effectively hit a point where we would stop work because we knew if we kept going, it was going to create so much pain that it might delay the launch. So we would kind of wait for the batch of work that we'd done to get merged. And then we'd pull a new copy of the main branch and pull a new development branch so that we could like work again.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I guess I can give you a demo real quick. So,
yeah, please.
Yeah, so I just added this one line of code right here called test.
Okay.
And so like I can look at the diff here and see that I added test. And what I can do is, so Graphite has a bunch of commands for moving up and down my branch list, right? So if I do okay, so one thing, so this is like super optimized for me, so it's not clear what it is that I'm doing. So like I have like this is my Git config, and as you can see, I have like hundreds of aliases, right? And so what I'm doing is, and so for a lot of them, right, for example, like this cherry pick command, right? I type git cp, but then I'm actually running Graphite cherry pick. And so from the terminal, you can't tell that I'm running Graphite all the time because I'm like feeding it into Graphite through Git aliases. But I actually like don't remember the Graphite commands because I've been using the aliases for so long. So I can't tell you what they are. I just like type and it like does things. Yeah.
All right.
So like let's say I have this change, right? And let's say I create a branch, call this Elvis test, right? I'm gonna save this, right? So this is creating a new branch. And so when I look at the tree, right, we'll see that both of these branches have this one as a parent, right? And so I can do like Graphite essentially branch down, and then I can go down a branch. So now I'm at this parent branch. If I do a backup, it'll ask me which one I want to jump to because there's two options, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then, so I guess another quick example that I can do, right? So we have this file. So I can do another, I don't know, test equals test. Actually, I don't know. Let's make this a new branch. So I'll do actually, let's call it test2. Test2. And then return. And then go down again. And then let's do one here. Yeah. Let's see, I do test3. Okay, cool. And then let's say I jump to main. So if I look at this tree again, right? So I have, this is my next branch. These are my children branches and things. So I can actually type like a Graphite. I don't know. It might be top That's what I call it. And then it'll go through and look at all of the lowest nodes in my tree and then ask me which one I want to jump to. So if I had a bunch of different forks, like if I had like a fork here, fork here, fork here, it's going to essentially go to the very bottom of them, show me all the branches that are possible for being the top, and then I can like jump to them, which is really helpful. But in this case, let's just go to test. And then they have some other commands that are pretty helpful. So like one of them is, let's see, I guess it's more interesting if I make this longer. So let me open this up again. Okay, I want to add another test. Actually, let's leave a test for. Okay, so they have another command for reordering your branches. So I can like look at the list of my branches in that line or that branch path, and then I can like just like move this around, and then Graphite will automatically go through and restack them and reorder them in the way that I want. And then if I have merge conflicts, it'll pull up that I have a merge conflict, and then I can do like accept incoming, save this, and then I can continue my rebase. And so in like 2 commands, it's like I could reorder literally 4 or 5 branches, and then Graphite will go through and fix them.
Okay.
So let me go to this real quick and fix this one. Let's do a current change. Continue this rebase. And then at the end of this, right, you can see that now this is fixed based on how I want it. And so the helpful thing about this is like, if I submit a PR for this branch right here, and then I get review, once I get my review back and I make changes, I can jump to this branch and be like, all right, restack all of the children branches, and then automatically resolve the rebases appropriately if there aren't merge conflicts. And then it'll automatically restack everything that's the descendant of those branches. And the cool thing is that the Graphite team has been really disciplined about only using Git primitives to do all this magic, right? And so so it's like you can do some of these things using Git. It just would take like 30 minutes to do. And so since they are using Git primitives, like you can still use GitHub or like Bitbucket or different Git providers.
So everything that's being done is like reflected in the Git history.
Yeah.
But Graphite is providing like a shortcut to do
like
really complicated Git stuff.
Super complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll automatically like for example, if I just rename a variable, right, I shouldn't have to like rebase every single branch manually after that. It's like Graphite can go through and fix that.
And so I guess to repeat this back, because a lot has happened.
A lot has happened.
So if I'm working, right, and then I'm gonna actually draw on the screen while I talk about this. So if we've got our main branch here, right, and then as time goes on, my teammate pulls a branch, and it ends up over here, and then a commit happens here, and then somebody pulls a branch and ends up over here, right, and then another commit happens here, and time continues. So what we would typically have to do is like any changes here would have to then be brought in here. We have to make sure that these are synced up.
One at a time.
And then we have to make sure that these are synced up. And then we have to make sure that these are synced up. And finally, we have to bring this back into the main branch where it becomes a commit. And then the same thing needs to happen here, where maybe this one works, but maybe this one has to go back to all of these before it can come in and finally become the main part of the branch, right? And so all of these different changes, making sure that whatever's happened at each commit in the process, what Graphite is doing is instead of making me do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 operations, it can sort of automate like, okay, grab that, grab that, grab that, grab this. And if there's no conflicts, it just does it.
Yeah.
And if there's a conflict, it shows me the conflict and says, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I choose which thing I want to do. And then I say go, and it gets me to the end.
And then, and there's another conflict. It'll stop there. And so you're just going to each conflict and then fixing it. And then boom, you've moved that branch like 6 places in like 10 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So this to me feels like one of those things that it doesn't. The way that a lot of us have chosen to solve this is that we will do things like forced merges. We will do things like big old squash commits and stuff like that. And the forced commit is probably a bad idea because you have a chance of blowing away your teammates' work. Squash rebase, merge rebase, like or merge commits, whatever. Those are we can fight about those all day. But the nice thing about this is that like as a rebase, you get to retain like everybody's work. So you know on a line by line basis what each person did, where it came from, what commit it was in, its history. When you squash or when you merge commit, sometimes you lose some of that branch context of like who did what, and it all sort of like gets lumped into one branch and then dropped into the main. And so these are, but rebases can be complicated and painful because if you don't know the git rebase command, it's like it's a lot, right? It's figuring out how a rebase works in the terminal is no joke. So this feels like a really nice way when you're working on teams that are moving fast to
keep your velocity.
Keep your velocity without sacrificing the trail, like the breadcrumbs of what happened or causing people to make decisions like holding off until the next main branch gets pulled or something.
Like you can still like tell a story. And my goal is like, how can I tell a story with my PRs? That way someone can follow the logic and then give better feedback. And the cool thing about Graphite is like, because they have like so many customers, they can they actually have some really cool blog posts talking about like best practices that you can only see that they're kind of in the position to see that other people can't, because they're like, hey, like the best PRs with regards to like review and review time are on average 50 lines of change, right? So they can just introspect from like an analytics point of view in terms of like best practices around Git and like creating PRs and things.
Cool.
But there's a couple more commands I want you to see though.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so one of them is you can stack onto, and so right now I'm on this test2 branch right here. And so I can type this, and then I can choose where I want to move this branch to. And so let's say I move it to test.
I'm sorry, you're literally changing its like
its parent.
Parent?
Yeah.
So it's gonna like unrebase the current parent and then rebase it under the new one?
Completely. Yeah.
Man, I think I did that once manually and it took me a whole day.
Yeah, totally. And like this is like literally like 5 seconds. Yeah, it's done.
That's incredible. Okay, all right. I'm seeing the value here because this is the sort of thing that, like, especially when you're, if I'm working on a feature branch, right? Like, one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of times I'll get myself into a mess with Git because I will be working on something and I want to pull a feature branch to try a new idea.
Yeah.
And then while I'm in that feature branch, I notice a problem and I fix that problem and I go, oh crap, that needs to be its own thing. That shouldn't be part of this branch. So I'll create a new branch and I'll like commit that change. And then I'm like, wait, I'm not actually going to ship this feature, but I want this fix to go back in. Yeah. And so then what I would typically do, and this sucks, is I would copy that code. I would check out main. I would create a new branch, paste the fix back in, and then I would open a PR. Because the thought of trying to like move my branch of a branch back into the main, I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I would just manually copy paste. So this is one of those like this saves me a lot of heartache because I can just say, well, move it over here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move all of them, right? So for example, I just moved test 3 on top of test 2, and then if I jump to test 4, I can also move test 4 to be on my ETL branch. And so you'll see, okay, cool. So let's see. Let's do accept incoming. There might be one more. Okay, cool. So now we have a vertical line, right? These are all on the same path now. And so the cool thing now as well is, so if I jump to the top of this, I can actually fold this branch into the previous one, right? So if I do this, it's gonna combine the two. So now if I look at it, that commit for that branch is now also on this branch.
Yo.
Yeah, so now both of these commits are on the same branch. And then if I want, I can actually squash these in the CLI and now it will merge those two commits into one. And so if I check out this commit right now, these are two. They've both been merged into one branch.
Okay. And so this is probably where I would stop worrying about it, because I feel like this is one of those games that I've played where I end up trying to make everything perfect. I'm like, I'm going to have the cleanest Git history ever.
I mean, that's what I do though. That's like,
I mean, but this is, and like, this is like, props to you for doing it. I found that it turns into like a perfectionism thing where I don't commit code because I'm trying to make my Git history perfect. But
I actually commit more.
Really? See,
yeah,
and this is what I love.
It's like a checkpoint in terms of like how you're thinking.
I love this. I love this.
Yeah.
See, this is fantastic because like, I think, and I also think it shows that like when you're looking at DevTools, you got to find the ones that make you more productive. So for me, I need the thing that lets me commit code in a way that is usable by other people as fast as possible. But I can't worry about the specifics of the commits, or I will rabbit hole on that and stay there forever and just try to make it like perfectly clean so that somebody can read my commit history like a book, right? But if I make sure that all my PRs are good, then I can read my pull requests like a book, and that to me is sufficient, because that's what most people are going to see, right? Yeah. And so it's very much like you got to find the layer that works for you. But what I'm loving about this is this idea that I don't need to be ultra vigilant when I'm working. If I see something to fix, I can pull a branch and fix it. Yeah. And then if I need to move that branch later, I can. And it doesn't cause me to lose like half a day. That's huge.
Yeah, super huge. And so for me, I end up like having a commit for every like little thought I have. And so I'll have like 6 commits in a branch. And then it's like at the very end, if this is all going to be in the same PR, I'm just going to squash it into one, right? And another thing that you can do, I'll show you real quick, is so I'm going to fold these three branches into one branch, and so I'll have 3 commits here, right? I can actually also split them, and so I can split them by the commit, and be like, all right, so I'm going to keep these 2 commits on one branch and move this other one, and then I can, I don't know, test this, that, or something. And then it'll actually do that for me. And then if I look at this, right, it's like I split the 2 by the commits, and I can also split them by the hunk. So I can actually kind of look at, do I want to like stage this particular thing and make that its own branch and things. But I can quit that because we don't need to do that.
Yes, so they have all of that's huge, because that's the other problem is when you accidentally commit like 500 changes into one thing, and then you want to merge part of it but not all of it. Being able to just go back and say, all right, this commit is where I made the thing that needs to merge, and the rest of the feature branch can wait. Yeah, boop, and you're done.
Then I also have a couple of Git commands that help me a lot. Or like I'll show you one of them. So so I have this command right here for diffs. And so what happens is if I don't give it a number, it'll just give me the diff for the current commit. But if I do give it a number, it'll go that many commits back in my diff, right? So if I do D4, it'll show me 4 commits back and show me the whole thing. And then I'm using this tool called Dexa, which is a pager. Okay. Yeah, it's a really good tool. It's called Delta. So I'm using that as my Git pager because it gives me like this nice formatting. Yeah, it gives me line numbers. It gives me like the function that this falls under. That way I can find it in my code. And then in Warp, like if you have a file path, I can command click, and then it would jump to where it is in VS Code, right? And so you can be like super effective. And
so so that's called. I want to make sure that we share this with everybody because this feels like a super useful tool. So that one was called
Delta. Hi, Delta Git Pager.
Is it syntax highlighter pager? Okay, so this one, this is incredible. Like that's a hell of a tool. And then I'm gonna share Graphite again because I think I shared it early on, and people didn't get a wait. Is this am I on the right thing?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
They do more than what I'm showing you. This is just kind of like the entry point, and I'll try to show you some of the other things they do that I use them for.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you have your aliases up somewhere for
Yeah,
folks who
totally,
like that
yeah.
that D command, for example, is one that I want.
Yeah, so if you go to GitHub and type my thing,
It's just your full name, right?
yeah, that's my name, yeah. And then go to repositories, and then scroll down a bit to Elvis Kaharo, yeah.
This one?
Yeah. And then I have all my stuff here. So
Is it going to be in your
it's
RC?
it's gonna be all in Git config. That way, all of the commands are behind Git and not like some weird like.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, that way
Okay,
Git is
okay.
kind of like the gator.
Dude, this is wild. This is the wildest alias config I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw this one. I'm gonna throw this specific permalink for anybody who wants to use that exact command. This is way too long to copy off the screen. So if you go to the Learn with Jason Discord, any links that get shared get thrown in the show links channel. You can get on the Discord by going to lwj.dev/Discord. I'll throw that up on the screen as well here. Yeah, this is cool stuff, like extremely cool stuff.
Yeah. So there's a couple more things I want to show you about Graphite.
Yes, let me get back over to your screen.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's say this branch, right? The files. This is another good command, dl, which is just showing me the files that have been changed in that particular commit.
My alias for that is S.
Okay. Wait, are you running git status?
Yeah, but I have like a big, like I have a
like a tree path essentially.
Something, yeah. It's like it's a specialized one that just shows me like a list of files.
Okay. Yeah. For DL for me is just the files that were changed in this commit. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the track files, yeah. And so another good thing about Graphite is like, so in this branch, right, these are the files that have been changed. So I've changed this connection file, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say I'm not on that branch. Let's say I'm on this top branch, right? And then actually, let me git blame this real quick. Okay, this is on temp. Okay, these are both temp. So let me fold this, squash this. Okay, cool. Okay, and then I'm going to reset this, and then I'm going to stash everything in this, and then keep this, and then. Okay, I'm just trying to set up this little demo real quick.
Yeah, I got you. This is also just like somebody's gonna have to watch this back on like 0.5x speed to see what the hell's going on right now.
Okay, so what I did is, so this branch had 2 files that were changed, but I only want to keep changes to 1 file, so I can show you this next command. That's pretty helpful. And so let's say I make a change to this connection class, right? So let's say I add timestamp or something. Get the datetime is there, cool. And so I look at my diff, right? We added timestamp. Right, I can actually, Graphite has this command called absorb, which is so sick. And what it'll do is it'll ask me, do I want to? It'll ask me for the changes I want to stage, and in this case, I want to stage this change, and then it'll go through my branches, figure out the appropriate branch for me to stage that change, automatically restack everything that depends on it, and then keep me on the current branch.
Okay, hold on. Let me repeat that back because I think my brain just melted.
Yeah.
You're saying if I'm on main and we've pulled a child of a child of a child of a child, we're like way down the tree in terms of what's going on.
So now we're 3 branches down. We're here.
So what you're saying is when you say absorb,
yes,
it goes back to main or wherever the change would need to be added. It finds the spot.
It loops through, finds where it should be added.
It puts that change in.
Yes.
And then rebases all child branches against that change.
And it keeps me on the same branch I'm on.
Holy shit.
And it will do this for multiple files. So if one of the files that I changed should be in this one and the other one should be here, it'll like split them and put them where they both belong. And then put me back to where I am. So I can just I can be like, oh, there's a bug, Graphite absorb. Every 10 seconds, I'm still working on my thing. So fixing a bug is trivial in terms of adding it to
that's out of control.
That's insane.
Dude. Okay. All right. I am. That one feels like I'm
That
gonna
was
learn how
magic.
I'm learn
That
how
was
graphite
magic.
works now because
Yeah.
that was that's worth the price of admission. Like that's the kind of stuff that I just don't deal with. And I'd be like, it's fine. We'll get this change merged in eventually.
Oh, Patrick's in the chat. Hey, Patrick. This is the strawberry GraphQL Patrick, I think that's in the chat. I'm in your Discord. Anyway. Yeah, so I guess the other two things. So Graphite's also like a platform in terms of like, so there's like a web console and you have like a dashboard where you can like submit PRs and things, and you can actually submit PRs using Graphite. And so
Okay.
yeah, so I do Graphite submit and then help, right? There's a bunch of things I can do here, right? And so the cool thing is that if you submit with Graphite, kind of the thing we talked about where someone gives you a review and then you make changes, Graphite will keep all of that intact and keep the syncing intact. But my Graphite command is, let me go right here. Assess. So submit with the CLI and then use AI. And so the cool thing about this one is, so let's say 2 branches down and I run this command, it'll jump to this next one. And since I have the AI flag, it'll parse my PR, right? Suggest an AI driven PR title. And then I'll just press tab. And then if you look at the actual PR description, this is also AI generated. And then I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty good. Then I can publish that PR. And then it'll go to the next branch because it starts on the branch that you trigger submit from. And so now it's going to the next branch. And then it'll generate a PR title description for me.
Oh,
that's... Yeah. And so what's wild is like, I don't think I've written a PR description from scratch in like 2 years.
But so, okay.
Yeah.
So what this is doing right now, just to repeat it back and make sure I understand it.
Yeah.
So if you're on, let's see, the test this branch, and you're saying I want to merge into main.
Yeah. But I have to submit all these
right. So you're asking Graphite to basically build the chain of PRs that gets test this into main.
And I can do this all from the CLI. So I can write the PR titles, PR descriptions all from the CLI. That way, again, I'm not like switching to a different tool, right?
This is like, man, I just can't. This is truly hard stuff.
Yeah, this is a good PR description, right? Like this is a way better PR description than what I would write.
Yeah, mine would be like, trust me, it's fine.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. And so it's gonna go through and it's gonna publish these, right? And it's gonna give me a link to them, so I can like view them. I can view them in the Graphite CLI, and I can also view them in GitHub. And so I have an alias that will automatically open that PR in GitHub. And so this is what it looks like in GitHub, right? And then.
And does it show the dependencies? Like it says, like, this depends on X or Y?
Yeah, so you can see it here, but the Graphite UI is actually a lot better for seeing the dependencies because it shows you the tree in their UI.
Oh.
Yeah, and then what I can do is, I've literally opened up like 8 or 9 PRs before, and like if I don't need someone to review them, I can like jump to a particular PR, and then I can go here, and I can be like rebase and merge, and then Graphite has a merge queue. And they'll go through and rebase and merge all of these PRs. And then it's like, 5 minutes later, like I merged 6 PRs, right? Like, and they've been like tested, they've been checked and things.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
that is out of control.
Yeah. Super nice. Super good tool.
Okay, I understand why everybody was talking about this. This is some really powerful stuff.
Yeah, Mero's team is pretty awesome.
Okay, so we have like 9 minutes left.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know if we're gonna have time to cover Reflex. Did you wanna cover anything else in Graphite, or do you want to do like a high level on Reflex?
I do high level on Reflex.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me go to the docs real quick. The Reflex docs are really good. Docs. Okay, so Reflex is a Python web framework that lets you build full stack apps all in Python. And what they're doing is pretty incredible, to be honest. And so like typically, I think for a lot of projects, you end up having like a fast API backend and some kind of like Next.js frontend. And the cool thing about Reflex is that they have a pretty extensive UI component library. And so like if you're building an app, and especially if you're building like an internal app or a prototyping app, it's a lot easier to build it in Reflex because you don't have to like write a bunch of boilerplate to connect your front end and back end, because Reflex being a full framework will abstract away a bunch of those things, right? And so the easiest example to show is like I have this simple counter app where I can increment these buttons, yeah. And so when I click increment, this goes up by 1, decrement goes down by 1. And the logic for all this is like 20 lines of code maybe.
Got it.
And so what you do is you import Reflex, and then what happens is you end up having a state, and then you end up having a front end, right? And so this is my front end for this app right here. And so
got it. Okay, so yeah, I see. I'm tracing. So the H stack is like the document.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then we just put in the elements, and it looks like Reflex has like the shorthand for the elements. Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume these are all typed. So like as I open up the button, it's gonna give me autocomplete for like what the arguments are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can see the arguments, and the most beautiful thing is like I can bind all of these elements to functions in my state, which is my backend, right? And so I can say on click, if someone clicks this button, I'm going to run this function decrement, and this is going to change count, right? And then Reflex keeps track of everything that's binded to count and will automatically update any UI components that are connected to this state variable for you.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the actual display of this number 12 is this heading right here, right? And so I don't have to say like, oh, do this thing to change heading. I can just say change count, and then everything that depends on count automatically gets changed.
And so this is bringing in, this is bringing in the reactivity of JavaScript frameworks into Python.
Exactly.
Which for those of us who've been working in JavaScript for a long time, like we forget that, you know, when you're dealing with something like PHP with Python, whatever, we don't have that like automatic reactivity most of the time.
Yeah.
And so we have to do something like update the template, refresh the page, whatever it is. So this is very nice. And then I believe I remember you saying that this can also like ingest React components. So like if I have a design system or something, I can just throw it in.
So all of these components like button, let me show you some of the components. Like all of these components like avatars, badges, forms, these are all React components that have been wrapped in Python.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so these are React components. So when you deploy your Reflex app, all of this front end code gets converted to React. And then all of this backend code gets turned into a fast API app. And then you essentially open up a WebSocket that sends changes to your UI over the WebSocket.
Very cool.
And then like the on-clicks and the event handlers get sent back to your backend, and then Reflex just manages all of this, stitching the two together. And so the cool thing is like, if you like look at their homepage, right? One, all of this is in Python. Like this whole web page is in Python, and they have a bunch of like themes that you can like use out of the box. They also have a bunch of sample apps that you can use. So like this really good Llama Index app, image generator app. And so you can actually like play around with some of these, and then you can like look at the code for them. And it's all Python. And so this is super good for like internal teams, because a lot of people who are doing like data engineering or data science, they come either from like an academic background. And it's like, one, they don't know JavaScript. Two, why would they want to learn JavaScript given that their core job is to do like analytics, but they still want to share like results and things, or like build an internal app that a team can use.
And I think that's actually like the core value prop here is that it's not necessarily like this isn't, if you're a JavaScript dev, you should consider learning Python to write code in Reflex. It's more like if your day job is Python and you're doing like there's so much of the AI stuff is powered by Python these days. There was a stat at GitHub Universe that apparently Python is the fastest growing language on GitHub for 2024, due in no small part to the huge rise in AI's popularity. So if you are a Python engineer and most of what you're doing is machine learning or data sets or, before AI, like Python was huge for like you said, academic stuff, like building out, doing math, doing machine learning, doing all these sorts of things that are very like data intensive. And if you want to show your results, you don't necessarily need to learn a new language. You have something here, being able to go to that Reflex showcase and say, this is a graph. I need to show a graph. Let me copy this code and like I'll retool it to use my data, which I know how to do in Python. And then you get a nice reactive, cool thing.
Yeah. It's kind of incredible. And the cool thing is that like now backend people can get the same kind of like expression that front-end people have, and now they can build things that people can interact with, right? And because like if you look at like some of the case studies that Reflex has made, it's like what would happen is you'd have like I guess in the fintech sector, you'd have like some quants who would like prototype an idea and then kind of prove it out theoretically with Python or with R, and they'd have to hand it off to another team to then spend like 4 or 5 months building some kind of app that internally people have access to. And it's like now you can cut that from like 6 months to like 1.5 months and enable the people who are like doing the core MVPing the ability to do that. And it's
they can theoretically build their MVP as like a web app that is then just done, right?
It's just done.
It can be the same process.
Yeah, same process, same file, huge. Single file. Yeah.
And like one of the things that's so important about this, and we gotta wrap up after this, but the thing that's so cool about this is that like internal tools almost never get funded, right? No matter how important we know they are, no matter how important we feel they are, the feeling of like doing, actually, let's just go back to this screen here. The feeling of doing these internal tools, companies just won't fund it because like customers don't see them, customers don't pay for them. So why would we allocate funds? No matter how much we need to see dashboards, no matter how much we need to verify whatever thing, we just assume the teams will figure it out somehow. So yeah, really, really interesting to hand them tools that let them solve this problem without a lot of resources and without needing a ton of buy-in or funding.
And they have the full power of Python, right? Because they can use any machine learning library that they want, right? You're literally just adding a front end. Yeah.
That's really, really, really cool. Yeah. So Elvis, unfortunately, we are completely out of time. So I'm going to do another quick shout out. Let me get my screen showing here for one quick second so we can say, let me do another quick shout out to Elvis. Make sure you go and connect there. And also make sure that you give a little shout out to our sponsor. We had Tuple today. That's how I was drawing on the screen, doing the reactions and stuff. We also had Vanessa here from White Coat Captioning doing all the live captions. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here. And, we had a great show. While you're looking at things on the Learn with Jason website, you should head on over to the schedule. Let me drop a link here. And you can find the other shows that we've got coming up. We've got a great set of shows coming up. Only some of them are up on the show.
Nice.
Yeah, we're going to learn about Terso. I had to reschedule this one because I had a travel nightmare, but we're going to pick it up in the new year. We've got Corey from Netflix coming in to teach us about test-driven development as a thinking tool, which is going to be a really like code philosophical episode. I'm super excited about it. Corey gave me a little bit of a preview of what he's talking about. I think it's going to be great. So set your calendars. This is going to be with Corey is going to be the last one for the year. That is next week.
Nice.
And I think it's going to be a banger to send us into the holidays. Also, stay tuned on the Learn with Jason YouTube channel because we have not one, but two exciting new things coming out next week. We've got a new episode of Web Dev Challenge and a brand new show called Leet Heat, which is a game show for developers hosted by my good friend Mark Texan. So make sure you're watching the Learn with Jason channel for that. It's going to be a blast. Elvis, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Any parting words for everyone?
I don't know. I feel like it's right now is the greatest time to be a developer because we just have so many tools that can help us be productive. And I don't know. So I feel like I use the holidays to like code more because you have less meetings, and so happy coding everyone over the holidays. Yeah.
I love it. What a great note to end on. Thank you all so much for hanging out, and I will see you next Tuesday on the live stream. Take care, y'all.